It's a new musical instrument. No, it's a pizza cutter. This will make more sense later. So, chapter was late coming out in regards to the fan translations, but that's fine. I just recorded something else yesterday that'll go up at another time. So, time for chapter 1109. Termination. So we get the first one of a new cover story number 26. And what we see is Onigashima. That is clearly, it's clearly what happened to Onigashima after the battle, because like both of the horns are gone, or parts of the horns are gone, and those got, chucked and hurt and destroyed during the battle with Kaido and Big Mom and everything on the roof. So that's there. And Onigashima is currently sinking into the bay of Wano, which I'm like, there's a couple of things that are a problem with this. A, the last time we saw Onigashima, it was crumbling on the ground in front of the flower capital, or outside the flower capital where Momonosuke landed it, and then when Aramaki showed up and revitalized Wano, which was a good thing he did, but he was there for a horrible reason. And he was fighting against the Scabbards and Momonosuke and Yamato and such. He made some did some stuff around there, and that wasn't too far from where Onigashima was. So we didn't get an update on what else has happened to Onigashima. I don't think we've seen Onigashima since then. So now, I'm assuming via using Momonosuke's powers of, him being able to, create, control his, dragon flames or flame clouds, was able to lift Onigashima out of Wano and move it and drop it back into the ocean. Now, he clearly did not put it back on top of the mountain where Onigashima had been, where Onigashima's island originally was, but now the problem is because there's the underwater version of Wano, the underwater ancient Wano, that Sukeyake showed to Robin and Law. Now there's that, and it looks like Onigashima is about to crush it, which is bad. So it's like, okay, that's not a good thing. How are you going to make this work? So it's like, okay, what's going on with this? But we're getting a new cover story, so it's about time, so we'll see how that goes. Going in the actual story, we start basically where we left off last chapter, which is with Stella's message getting ready to be sent out to the world. And what we are seeing, and I like how they're doing this, is throughout for a good chunk of the chapter, we get it where Vegapunk is like, he's in prep mode to deliver the message, and we'll find out why in a minute, but like throughout the chapter we have like the audio bubbles interjecting of like the Stella body interacting with Shaka and Pythagoras and such, as like this is being filmed, or when this was filmed in the first place, which is again pointed out a few times in the chapter. So what we have is, it's basically stated that there was a dead man switch that Vegapunk had set up. That was, if, my heart rate drops below this, or if my heart rate stops, then this message needs to be sent out to the world. And that's what's going on. So we have Stella is like, I think it's Shaka talking to Stella, and it's like, Stella, is this wise? And it's like, even if you set this broadcast, you start suddenly, it may not work. And Stella's like, what do you mean, Shaka? And Shaka's like, we're counting too much on people being ready to receive and delay this. And, and it's still Shaka and Vegapunk going back and forth, and it's like, how it is with information. Agencies always spread the news all around the world by the next day. So this is very true. We've seen this happen with the World Economic Times or Journal or whatever it's called, with Big Morgan's newspaper, that if with big news that happened with like a being captured, and then, everything else that's happened with all the different bounties and everything else like that, and even what happened in Wano being, revealed to the rest of the world, and Luffy becoming a Yonko and everything. That was all taken care of pretty quickly because Morgan's had, insider information. And even Cobra's assassination, because of the information that he had and such. So that is very true. And even in our world, that is very true. We have like 24-hour news networks and news cycles, and there's newspapers, and there's online newspapers, and there's so much other stuff that you can get. Like, just get the news almost as soon as it's happening. We have our own phones that we can look up news anytime it's necessary. In the One Piece world, they don't really have as easy of a process of that because they have the Denden Mushi, and then they have the various types of Denden Mushi. They have the visual Denden Mushi, which are the very big ones, and then they have the smaller visual ones, and then they have like the regular, just the audio Denden Mushi that they use for phones. They also have like camera Denden Mushi, which is adorable. And then they have the newspaper that Morgan sends out. And I think Morgan is going to be very interested in what's going to be said, because then if anything, he can print it and distribute it to the world that way, so that it's like, this is what happened, and then it's like Morgan's own spin on stuff, of course. But so we have like Shaka and Vegapunk going back and forth while they're talking, and they're like, okay, you think so? But what if someone intercepts or censors our message? And then we cut out to outside of Onigashima. I still got Wano on the brain. Outside of Egghead, where we see all the different marine ships. Some of them are on fire and sinking. Other ones are still being attacked by the pacifistas. And it's like, where is this broadcast coming from? It's coming from every ship's transponder snail. So it's like, yeah, the Marines' transponder snails are going to be affected by this as well. And, still the conversation between the Vegapunks is like, you're right. Any suggestions? And it's either Shaka that says this, and it's just like, we could piggyback off the Navy's comms traffic. That would allow us to force the worldwide constant broadcast while our signal strength at maximum, And we see a bunch of the Marines are starting to freak out about this. Like a higher level one is just like, cut that communication or cut the connection. And there's like, that's the thing, we can't. And it's just like, all of them are just like panicking. It's like, we can't make the snail stop. It won't stop. The call is coming from inside the network type of a thing. So it's like, they're all freaking out. We cut back into Egghead Island, where we cut back to where Luffy has an admiral in one hand and a Gorosei, being held back with the other. So we have that going on. And Luffy's like, And like they're hearing the broadcast over the system over Egghead, and it's just like, I see. That'll make it possible for anyone with a transponder snail to receive our initial voice message. But they'll still need a while to prepare their visual transponder snails. The time to set that up will vary from place to place. And it's like, Vegapunk's like, okay, well, let's take an interval of an hour. And we cut to Saturn, who still looks psycho. And he's like, what are you planning to say, Vegapunk? And that's what he's thinking. And then we cut up to where Nami and Usopp are with Chopper and Edison. And Robin's still like on a little medi bed behind them. And Nami's like, that's Vegapunk, right? And they're like, yeah, where is it coming from? And why now? They're all very confused by this. Well, Edison may not be as confused as the other two, but the other ones are, the Straw Hats are confused. And the message is like, an hour? That's too long. Don't you realize that will happen in that time? There are people who won't be pleased when we start this broadcast. They may find a way to terminate it before we finish. And we cut back to somewhere else on the island where we see a giant. It's not Dory or Broggy. It's just one of the other giants that's like attacking one of the marine ships, and causing more havoc there. And it's just like, back to the message. Fair point. In that case, let's set the preparation interval to 10 minutes. So it's just like, I love the fact that like as this whole thing was being recorded, it's like Vegapunk is like starting this, and it's like, this was not scripted by any means. This was not scripted. And I love that. And it's like Shaka, and we're gonna see Pythagoras also pop up in a little bit, but like they're like talking with Vegapunk while all of this is going on and while they were recording it, and it's just like, well, okay, what's going on? And then we cut to where Sanji is with Vegapunk in his arms. He's like, Vegapunk, that's your voice, right? Hey! And he's like, oh no. And like Vegapunk looks kind of, well, dead. So Vegapunk is either like his heart rate has dropped and stopped to the point where it's like that's what's causing this to activate. And it's not like it's impossible to bring someone back from cardiac arrest from their heart stopping from that setup. It's like you can still shock them back to life. I mean, we saw Eneru pull that off, which I still find BS. But like, that's what, recitator, what the paddle machines are for when it comes to like shocking someone's heart back to life and stuff like that. Law has an attack that does something very similar to that, where he will, shock someone back to life, and such. So it's like all that, and we see Vegapunk, and it's the possibly dead Vegapunk, with the panel of people of the world, and because I am a dork and B a Spice Girls fan, when it was like people of the world, I started hearing the Spice Girls song that has that in it pop up in my head. The other one that I had with this, that was like, I was trying to figure out if I wanted to do like a parody of something here, and I'm just like, I'm not good at writing parodies. I was thinking of, because it's like, Vegapunk is like, hello world, and I was trying to think of like, is there any other songs that have that? And I'm like, well, have like a beat that has that in it, and I'm like, well, there's Hello by Adele, and I'm like, no, not quite. And then the other one that I thought of was Cherry Bomb by Joan Jett and the Runaways, and it was like, can I do a weird version of that? And I'm like, I could attempt it, but it wouldn't turn out very good, so I'm not going to. So we cut back to where we see Saturn still looking angry and still being, pinned by Luffy. And we cut to the Holy Land of Marijois with, we see the, the city there, the city of Pangaea, or the city of Marijois, and then like Pangaea Castle in the background. And, logic dictates that, this is going to cause their snails to go off too. And of course, I'm going to use a lot of visuals in this from Uta's video, from the film Red, because of course Uta did something very similar with her projections, where she was using, the snails from the SSG to be able to transmit all over the world and have that type of a setup, and where people could, listen to her songs and everything like that. Also, last week, after the review, I spent getting caught up on some of the other One Piece stuff, with several emotionally torturing episodes with Robin and Brooke, and then I decided to just torture myself more and watch film Red, and I'm like, I love the movie, but it leaves you an emotional wreck afterwards, with everything that happens. So it's like, yeah, I've kind of got film Red on the brain right now again. And what we see is like the celestial dragons are like all yelling about like, what is this transmission? What is the meaning of this? And they're like freaking out, and because their snails are just starting to go off. And we we have where it's supposed to be. This basically confirms that that all of the Gorosei can like telepathically communicate with each other. And because Saturn is not on the island, and the other four are Saturn is not at Marijois, and the other four are, and he's still part of this conversation. And it's like, Saturn, have you dealt with Vegapunk? And it's like, Kizaru delivered a killing blow. I saw it myself. And the other four are like, And it's like, he should be dead. And it's just like, could he have set up a dead man switch so that this message would play upon the death of his main body? And one of the other ones was like, that seems likely. And it's just like, we have no way of knowing what he will say. And War Curie is like, if we can just pinpoint the source of this broadcast. And Jupiter is like, the only location that seems plausible is the Labostratum on Egghead. But it's currently protected by that barrier of his. So again, the Labosphere, the laser grid, seems to be back up and working. We cut back to like the main screen where the message is being projected. that's being played on Egghead Island, and it's Shaka and Vegapunk are still talking in the background, and Pythagoras has popped his head into the camera, which is cute, and it's just like, what should we do for the remaining 9.5 minutes? And Russell's like, we could get inventing. There's so much to do, and I think that's Pythagoras, and it's just like, how about some coffee? It's just like going back and forth, and now we get to where we start cutting all around the world to kind of like prep work for like what the big message is going to be. So first place we go is Dressrosa, which is an ally of the Straw Hats. And it's like some of the random citizens in Dressrosa, who these might be people we saw running around Dressrosa before, but I don't recognize any of them specifically off the top of my head. There's like the woman doing like the Dressrosa dancing pose in the background and stuff. And it's just like, did you hear that? This is Dr. Vegapunk we're talking about. If he's trying to tell the entire world something, it must be big. It must be a big deal. They're like, yeah, get a visual transponder snail out here, put up a screen. It's like, hurry, we only have 10 minutes. So it's like they're all scrambling to try to get this set up. And then we cut to another area where we have Rebecca, Kiros, the Tontara, and possibly Tank in the background. I can't tell if that's supposed to be Tank, but we cut to them, and it's like the Tontara are like, the wise man Luffy Land's kidnapped? What's happening? And Rebecca's like, don't tell me you guys trusted another bad article about Lucy. I love that. She's like, you guys really need to be more careful about what you read. And they have Vega, it's the thing, it's being projected up on the screen. So they have the Denten Mushi out, the visual one out. And I can't tell if they're supposed to be in the palace where all of this is happening, or if they are supposed to be out in a different area, because I love this, both Rebecca and Kiros have their swords with them, and they both look like they've been working up a sweat, like they've been training. So I love the fact that implies that Rebecca has still been practicing with Kiros to get better at being a swordswoman. And I mean, I went over a whole thing when I did Rebecca's video several weeks ago about with the Riku family and everything like that for Dressrosa, and I said I really want to see something that shows that she's been training more, that she's kept up her training with her sword skills, so that way she can at least be able to protect her country and protect her people and stuff in a protective role as opposed to like an offensive role, which we saw that Rebecca was very good at defensive fighting and stuff like that during everything that was going on in the Colosseum and everything. So it's like, I like that it's showing that they were clearly training, and I love that. Also, it just shows Rebecca and Kiros together, which always just makes me happy. But we see Vegapunk and Shaka and Pythagoras up on the screen, and it's just like, I could also calculate the probability of interference happening, and I think that's supposed to be Pythagoras saying that. And Kiros is like, we've got the video ready. Is that Vegapunk? And then we cut to Fuchsia Village in the East Blue. So we're cutting all over again. And we cut to Fuchsia Village, where we have a bunch of the citizens are, they have like the snails out. They're, we know that Fuchsia Village is a very poor village, so we know that they don't always have the ability to have like the best stuff in regards to like the highest technology. They have at least one transponder snail, maybe more than one. Because we see one of the villagers has a transponder snail, and it's just like, what's this all about? I thought it was just going to be more news bad-mouthing Luffy, which I love that fact. I love that he says that, because the people of Fuchsia Village know the type of person that Luffy is. They know what he is like and what Ace was like, and even like Sabo as a little kid. They know that Luffy is not just going to kidnap Vegapunk and cause all that problem. So they're like, yeah, it has to be a problem with like Luffy. What they're saying about Luffy has to be bad. It has to be false. That's not the way Luffy would be. And I love that they're like, no, this Luffy is a good person. I love that, because Makino would say the same thing. And as grumpy as Whoopslap is in a moment, he knows that Luffy is a good kid. Pirate or not, Yonko or not, Luffy is a good kid. And the Ace was a good kid, and everything that happened with Sabo, it's like that can't be true for what happened at Sabo with Cobra. So we see some of the other villages like, a visual snail, if only the village had one. How about it, Mayor? And we cut to probably inside Party's bar, where it's just like, who's gonna pay for that? Raising it wouldn't be free, isn't having audio enough, and they're just like, ugh. So it's just like, A, the village is poor anyway, B, Whoop Slap's being a bit of a cheapskate. Although in film Red, we do have the moment where we do have it that, you know, they're able to stream, and yes, I'm aware of the fact that film Red is not canon, but like they're able to stream like Utah's concert in film Red at Fuchsia Village. So I don't know. Then we cut to Water 7 in the Grand Line. So we're cutting around the world. And it seems to be daytime in Fuchsia. And since we didn't really see Dressrosa might be like nighttime. And again, it's like I don't remember exactly how all the different blues add up around which parts of the first half and second half of the Grand Line for the Grand Line and the New World and everything for Paradise and everything. But we cut to Water 7 where it seems to be nighttime. And it's like, wake up, this can't be good. And we cut to Iceberg's house where we see Iceberg just waking up, which we really haven't seen Iceberg that much post time skip. We got a little bit when we got like Frankie's first bounty with them like freaking out over the fact that Frankie's bounty poster was the Frankie Shogun, and then a little bit of some other bits. And we saw him a little more recently when they were going over the chapters with what was coming for like the earthquakes and rumbles and stuff like that from when everything happened with the Lucia Kingdom. So that happened, but we haven't really seen that much of Iceberg since post time skip, and I don't even know if Oda really gave him a full redesign post time skip. It's not too much different. But we see him waking up and he's just like, yawn, and it's spelled Alice, but the way that it's supposed to be pronounced is Alice, which I know was supposed to mean something, but I don't remember what it is. It's like a number or something like that. But it's like Alice is how it's supposed to be pronounced, and it's just like, prepare to screen the message, and he's like okay, whatever, oh, message, Dendamushi, okay, yeah, sure, fine, yeah, prepare it. And she's like the perfect little secretary that she is, which I love this little girl, and we finally get a name for her. That this is a reference to way back during one of the cover page series where it's like we saw Iceberg holding auditions to get a new secretary because his last one betrayed him and tried to assassinate him in regards to Khalifa. And he got like the little girl as his secretary, and we haven't really, because the cover series aren't animated all that often, or very little, we didn't really get to see anything else of her, and now we finally get to see her, so we'll finally actually get to see her like on screen. But she's like, yes, Mr. President, it's already playing in the room next door. Screens for each dock are also being prepared. It's nighttime, but considering the importance of this event, a summons has been issued notifying all citizens to be at a screen within 10 minutes. Is there anything else? So she is just being exceedingly efficient, which I love. And she also has like the little mouse sitting on her head. Tyrannosaurus is the mouse's name. So he's still around, and he has his own little suit, which is so adorable. We cut to the World Economic Journal, their headquarters in the Flying Teapot. I still love that. And it's like, what's with this feed? It's being relayed through Navy frequencies, but it's unencrypted. So it's just like, this is literally, Vegapunk is like, I'm going to broadcast this to the entire world, but it's not encrypted at all, so that way everybody can hear it. And then we see, and I think that's supposed to be Morgan's that's kind of freaking out about that, or it might be just some of the other people that work at the newspaper. And we see Vivi, and she's like, where are Luffy-san and the others? And she's looking at the screen, and it's just like, and Morgan's just pointing, I was like, don't be a ditz, look at the clock in the background. That isn't the current time at Egghead. This must have been pre-recorded. After all, the Buster Call is bound to have reduced the island to a sea of flames by now. So it's like, we see a Wapol is there in the background looking very bored and does not care. We see one of the other journalist women there that's like clearly has like a little bit of a crush, is fangirling over Vivi, and she's like, looking at Vivi. And Morgan's is like, they're playing the message up on the big screen with their visual Dendamushi. And so I like the fact that this is kind of addressing the fact that the One Piece world does technically have, like, I guess, time zones in it to a degree, because, like, it's night on Water 7, but it's, like, daytime in Fuchsia Village, and it looks to be daytime in Dressrosa, and, like, he's like, that's not the right time that it would be on Egghead right now. So it's just, like, does, like, the world do, does the World Economic Times, like a lot of different newspapers or news organizations, will have it where they have clocks on the wall that are all set to the different time zones of like major cities of like Tokyo and Beijing and London and, you know, Paris and New York and Denver and stuff like that, and like LA and like other major cities around the world, because of how like the time zones are set up. One Piece never really has addressed time zones for the most part. So we're seeing that that's kind of being addressed here in Morgan's is like, well, that has to be pre-recorded because that is not the time. Also, the entire island should be on fire right now because of the Buster Call. And then we're cutting to a few other areas. We cut to the West Blue where we see, again, they're, you know, watching the thing, and it's just like, Dr. Vegapunk in the flesh? I heard his mind was a cut above the rest, but this isn't what I expected. So I love the fact that it's like several of them are reacting to the fact that Vegapunk has like cut off the top of his head and has the apple, which is adorable. So I love that. We cut to the North Blue where it's on a winter island. It might be Karakuri Island, but it doesn't specifically state it, so it may not be. But it's just like the man who lit up the world. And then we cut to the South Blue on a very tropical island, and it's just like, he's going through all this trouble. What does he want the world to know? It might be the invention of the century or something. Well, it's not necessarily the invention of the century, but it might lead to the revolution of the century. So now we cut to the Kamabaka Queendom and the Grand Line, where they have the screen set up with Vegapunk and, you know, blah 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 on the screen. And we have Ivankov watching this, and a whole bunch of the Revolutionary Army and a bunch of the, you know, Okamas and stuff like that are all watching the screen. And on the screen, Vegapunk is like, it'll take 10 minutes to brew the coffee. I won't get a sip of it. I won't get a sip in. And it's just like, Pythagoras is also talking to him. It's just like, or Pythagoras or Shaka or Vegapunk, whichever one is saying, I see. The probability of interference in this time frame is exceptionally low. So it's like, I like the fact that it's like Shaka is the reasonable one, and he pointed out to Vegapunk that it's just like, okay, you can't give them an hour to set everything up, because that could be too long and the government may be able to find a way to override our system by then. So that's not good. And you can't have it be too short because they may not have time to get their Dendenmushi ready and get everybody ready to watch the video. Watch the message. So we can't do that. So it's like 10 minutes. So it's just like, yeah, the amount of interference that could happen in this time is very low and such. So there's that. So we see Ivankov, and it's just like, what is Vegapunk up to now? More importantly, has he lost his head? Which is, again, I love the references to the fact that like Vegapunk has like chopped off part of his head. And we see Koala, Morley, Sabo, Lindbergh, Karasu, and Bellabadi. So we see all of them, and they're all looking, and Koala is like, so that's the Dr. Vegapunk everyone's always talking about. And Morley's like, I think it's Morley, it might be Koala again, but I think it's Morley. It's like, he's quite the man to do this in the middle of a crisis. And Sabo's just like, And we cut to Dragon. And Dragon is thinking back on, you know, the conversation he was having with Shaka at the very beginning of this arc, where it's just like, I think I'll be dead soon, where he's talking to Shaka, and that just happened in one of the more recent episodes. Now we cut back to Egghead, and we stay on Egghead for, I believe, the rest of the arc, beyond maybe cutting back a little bit to Marie Schwab, but we cut back to Egghead, and Luffy's just like, looks like my punches don't damage you, as he's looking at Saturn. And Kizaru tries to, lights up his eyes and tries to laser Luffy with his eyes, which I don't know if that's the first time we've seen Kizaru try to do that. He usually has like the lasers come out of his fingers or his feet. I don't know if we've seen Kizaru try to laser anyone with his eyes before, but he tries to laser Luffy. Luffy dodges, still holding on to both of them. And he's just like, fine. And it's just like, I'm not letting you two run off. Not until I'm sure my friends have escaped. And he like grabs both of them, swings his arms back behind him, and he's like, gum gum, booming dawn, and he like swings them forward and like swings both of them toward each other at the same time, which I love this. And it's like Kizaru is like in one hand and he's like not very big, and then he's got Saturn in the other hand, and she's just like And I think Luffy made his hands get bigger anyway to do this. And it's like, booming dawn. I scared the dog the last time I tried to make a really loud noise, so I'm going to try not to do that. Symbol! And he like smashes them together like you would with like two cymbals. And I love that. It's just like squish. And like the shockwaves from it are like reverberating across the island. Admittedly, the island's mostly destroyed at this point in time, so it's not really causing too much extra damage on top of everything, but it's just like this shockwave going across the island. And we cut to where Luffy like pulls his hands apart and they're both like pancaked. Like the whole like run over by a cement roller flattened type of a thing. Okay, I just had the image pop into my head because I'm a Disney nerd of in Who Framed Roger Rabbit where Judge Doom gets steamrolled by the cement roller, and then he turns and it's like, oh my god, he's a toon, and he stands up and like starts wobbling all over the place, and like both Saturn and Kizaru have like the seeing stars above their head, which I love. They're just like, Luffy grabs them and starts spinning them, which is where the pizza cutter reference comes into play. He's like spinning them and spinning them and spinning them on his fingers like you would pizza. Saturn's much bigger than Kizaru, even with Luffy being in his giant form. He's just like, whee! Like spinning them around, which I love. And Saturn has to be thinking, this is the most embarrassing and demoralizing thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life. Type of a thing. And it's just like, since you keep getting better no matter what, so Luffy has noticed that Saturn keeps regenerated in regards to not being hurt by Luffy's attacks or even by Kuma's attacks when he got hit. He throws them and he's just like, I'll send you flying for good. So he throws them, tosses them. It's like spinning pizzas. It's like, now they're frisbees. First they got squished like cymbals. Now they've been flattened. Now they've been spun around like pizzas. Now they've been turned into frisbees. So it's just like Saturn is like, this is just getting ridiculous. And Kizaru is like, ugh. And they get tossed, set flying and out of the island. And he's just like, we got to Marine Timber. It's just like, well, he threw something, huh? And Kizaru hits the ship, lands on the ship, and Luffy's just like sitting there laughing his head off as this is happening. Saturn manages to get enough of a shifting momentum in his own power in his own body, and he starts he boomerangs himself back at Luffy, and he's unsquished himself a bit, and he's got all of his like spider legs sticking out and like making like a giant pinwheel where he's, getting ready to like try to stab Luffy as best he can in this regard. So it's like, okay, he gets points for that. And he's like coming back at Luffy, and Luffy's just like the eyes popping out of their sockets again, and he's just like, what's it gonna take to keep you down? And he's getting very angry at this. And Kizaru landed in one of the ships, and they're just like, Kizaru-san. And it's like, what in the world happened? Are you all right? And he's just like laying there on the ground like, Kizaru is not having a fun day by any means. I'm almost done. You're okay. I love you. And just like Kizaru is not having a good day. Neither is Saturn. He had a slave that he basically turned into a robot, fight back against him and punch him and send him flying. Then he got taunted by the Blackbeard pirates. Then he got punched again by Luffy. Now he got turned into a symbol pizza frisbee boomerang type of a thing. So Saturn's not having a good day. Neither is Kizaru. Kizaru had to shoot an old friend, had to, laser beam an old friend. It's like, Kizaru, you could have made the right choice and not done it and tried to help, but no, you chose poorly, to quote Indiana Jones. And what happens is, so Saturn's spinning back towards Luffy, and Luffy's like dodging him and getting out of the way and everything. And we have Saturn again communicating back to the other Gorosei at Marige while using their telepathy. And one of them is just like, there's no time, Saturn. It's just like, we cannot allow Vegapunk to speak freely. And so Luffy's dodging, and then we have one panel that is showing where it would be Bonnie, Frankie, Atlas, and Kuma are all being brought to the giant ship, the giant warrior pirate ship, and it's just like, there it is, this is our ship, and it's just like, I hope Vegapunk and the others are okay, are all right. I think that might be like Bonnie saying that. So it's like they're getting to the giant ship. So, well, we know that Bluegrass and Doll are on their way around the island on the giraffe, the sea beast, cybernetic sea beast giraffe, making their way around the island to try to deal with the giants. So that could be something that gets brought up. And even if Bonnie's on the ship and such, you know, we'll see what happens there. But they seem to be at least somewhat in a safer area. This part of the island does not seem to be imminently under attack right now. I mean, like, there's like flames in the background because the island is on fire, but it doesn't seem to be as imminent of a problem. So that's at least some parts of the group that are safe. And then we cut back to Saturn, and he's like, I shall perform the summoning, and he just looks even more angry and psycho, spider psycho. And he's just like, and the others are like, very well. And so he lands. We see more black lightning being summoned from somewhere, and we see outside the island the Marines are just like, oh my god, what the more black lightning, and they're freaking out. And we cut to back inside the island where we see that 4 more of those like summoning circles that had Saturn appear out of one of them earlier on in the arc when he first got to the island, when he first arrived on the island going ashore, that shows up. Now we have the other 4 showing up, which would be the other 4 Gorosei showing up. And there's kind of this whole thing of like, so this is just kind of like okay, so let me finish up what's the little bits that we see here happening in the chapter, and then I'll go into a little bit more. So we see Luffy is just like, what is going on, with his eyeballs popping out of his socket again. We cut back to Sanji, who is still carrying Vegapunk, and he looks back and he's like, what the hell? He's just like, that's just like when that spider geezer appeared. And the little note from the editor is just like, the planets are aligning, is what it says. And we do have a break next week, so we'll have to wait and find out what happens. But so the planets are aligning, which, by the way, I've tried looking up how often the planets like actually align, and it's like, that is a very hard question, because it's like, do you mean, have the planets ever been fully aligned, as in like in their order of like Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and such? Like, has that ever happened where they've all been perfectly in alignment? And I'm like, I highly doubt it. And even if it has, it's like, that would be like a very, very, just considering how long so many of them take to go around the Earth or go around the sun, that it would just take so long for any of that to ever happen again. So it's like, it also makes me think of the Disney movie Hercules, where the fates are like, in 18 years precisely, the planets will align ever so nicely. Or they're like telling Hades about like, oh, if the planets align, then you'll be able to like free the Titans and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, the planets are quote unquote aligning in this regard for like the elder planets. If, you know, all 5 of them are showing up here, Luffy's having enough trouble trying to deal with one Gorosei. And I mean, like, yeah, he can do some damage to him, but it doesn't seem to be sticking. So it's like, he's had enough problems dealing with one, and the Straw Hats alone have had enough problems dealing with one Gorosei. Now there's all 5 of them are going to be here. And if, I mean, like, this would be a good way for us to see like what they can actually turn into for like all of their like, you know, demon forms or their transformation forms. So there's that. But it's also like, okay, there's a lot here, but it's also like, there has to be something else that happens here, because it's like, okay, they have, you know, it's like, okay, so Robin's still kind of down for the count. Frankie took a bit of damage, but he can still fight. Sanji can still fight to a degree. Zoro's still off dealing with Lucci, and Jinbei's trying to finish that, trying to make them stop fighting. It's like Jinbei's in dad mode, like, okay, that's enough, you two, break it up. And then we have, you know, as much as I love Nami, Usopp, and Chopper, I don't think they're going to be much use against the Gorosei as an attacking force. barring like being able to like combine powers or like help soup up like Nami, like souping up Luffy's power, like giving him more lightning to work with so he could use that to fight against the Gorosei. That's a good combo move there. Or like Luffy trying to find a way to use like Usopp's green stars to help him, like what happened in Stampede, where like Usopp's different plants and stuff like that, projectiles, were very useful against Bullet because they made him, freeze up with his, made his robotic body freeze up, and Luffy was able to use that to his advantage. So there's a bunch of stuff there, but it's also like, and yeah, they have Dory and Bragi and Oimo and Kashi and a bunch of the other giants on there, and they have like the pacifistas, but I don't think that's going to be enough to try to take out the Gorosei. And even though Luffy is technically in retreat mode, quote unquote, where he's trying to, he's acting as a distraction so that way the rest of his crew, very similar to what happened on Whole Cake Island, where he was dealing with Katakuri in the Miro world and using that so that way the rest of his crew could work on trying to escape, but also work on trying to make the cake, so the wedding cake, so that way they could get Big Mom to calm down and use that as a distraction as well, so that way they could escape Totland. And in this case, Luffy is again using himself as like a decoy, and Luffy would sacrifice himself for his crew, no questions asked. He would. He's almost done it several times, and he would do that. But his crew would also do the same thing to him, where they would like sacrifice themselves for Luffy. Even Zoro did that way back on Thriller Bark, and the others have done similar things where they've like stated their convictions and loyalty and belief in Luffy. And so we get to see, we might get to see something with that, but it's just like, as strong as Luffy has gotten, I don't see him being a match to deal with 5 Gorosei at the same time on his own and all of that. I do not see that happening. Even if Dory and Bragi show up and they are able to like help Luffy with like dealing something with Saturn, that would be one thing and that would be helpful. But Luffy's intention right now is to like just literally be there as a distraction while the rest of the Straw Hats are getting out of the Labos phase and into the Sunny and getting ready to leave. They can't use they can't use Vega Force 1 anymore, but maybe they can use something to do with something else that they have on the island. The giant robot is always a possibility. The ancient giant robot could wake up again. That's a possibility. And come, make its way to the surface, depending on how that works. There could be something where, since the Dory and Bragi are there, all they have to do is like get the ship out, get, the Sunny out of the Labos phase and down with everybody in it into, the Viking longship, and then Luffy just has to find a way to get out. And that would be one thing. And it's like, even if they have the rest of the pacifistas stay on the island and like Bonnie orders them to like aim all of your lasers at the Gorosei and fire and fire and fire until we're able to escape, and then they're able to go. Now, the other question that one of the other questions that involves this is, okay, if it was easily possible for Saturn and the others to travel from Mary Joie all the way here to Egghead Island, which is a long ways away, good distance into the New World, then why did Saturn have to be on the ship to begin with when he was on his way here from Mary Joie? I could understand it being because of like a cover thing where he's just like, well, we can't reveal that we have this ability to travel literally from like Mary Joie to here in an instant. So he may have taken, ridden on the ship all the way out there with Kizaru and the other vice admirals being the only ones that knew that he was there, and his private chef knew that he was there. And then maybe he has to be in a certain proximity, and then he says, I will perform the summoning. So does that mean that the other Gorosei do have the ability to travel that far, but one of them already has to be on the island? And maybe it is Saturn who has to be there, because it might be that maybe Saturn is the weakest out of the Gorosei, and it may be that he may be like the vanguard, where he like has all this power, and he's very good with it and everything like that, and maybe him alone might generally be like a way of dealing with a certain threat and everything like that, because he's the only one that we've seen leave Marie Joie in this instance. And then in the Kuma's flashback where he was at God Valley, he was the only one that we've seen leave Marie Joie. We haven't seen any of the other ones actually leave Marie Joie in any other circumstances for any of the other flashbacks that we've seen. Everything else, it's always been them at Marie Joie. And what it could be is that he has to go as like a vanguard, and then he can get to the island once he, arrive on the island once he's in like a certain proximity of the island, and he's able to like, get to the island and turn into his spider form and everything. And then if, in this case, since he's not enough of a threat to finish everything off, and now we kind of have like this 10-minute countdown thing, or like a little bit less than 10 minutes at this point in time type of a countdown, where it's like, okay, the other Gorosei have shown up on the island, and even if Luffy's busy still dealing with Saturn, Zoro's still been dealing with, Lucci, and like they might see what's going on here, and Zoro might just be like, okay, screw it, go Ashura, take out Lucci, and that's done with. And then he might turn around and maybe he ends up having to fight like, Venus Joro, and fight him, because that's like the Gorosei fight that like they want to see there, with like Zoro versus him, and like Sanji versus his uncle versus Jew Peter and everything. So it's like there's a lot of that there, but there's also the whole thing of like, okay, well, they need to have something that can deter the Gorosei, and they've got a ton of the Pacifista that they can use to deter the Gorosei by attacking the Gorosei and just like filling them full of laser holes and forcing them to have to focus on like regenerating again and again and again. But the Gorosei could just very easily turn into their whatever half hybrid monster forms and just like destroy the Pacifista. That could happen too. Kuma could, move again and do something and cause more damage. S-Bear could wake up and find his way out, and his primary control could be Bonnie, and he just like starts, fighting to protect her and does stuff there. S-Snake could show up, and I highly doubt the Gorosei would be affected by her powers, but she could show up and, attempt to try to, be like, oh, Mr. Gorosei, you don't want to hurt me, and then go cute and then like, petrify them or whatever. I don't think that's going to work. Same thing with like the, S-Hawk and then S-Shark. Like they could show up, but like, who's going to be the authority for them? Who's going to be the main authority for them? Unless Vegapunk has like another switch he can flip that'll like make them obey, the Straw Hats or something. Which S-Snake would be maybe there. S-Bear with Bonnie would make sense. But then S-Shark and S-Hawk, as I went over, we don't know who their emotional override would be for being able to like, want to, fight alongside the Straw Hats or betray, the Gorosei and everything like that. We don't know who their quote-unquote emotional override would be, like Bonnie is for S-Shark and like Luffy seems to be for S-Snake. So there's that concept. But so those are all some of those different questions that need to be asked for, like, okay, well, Luffy can't deal with all 5 of them at once, and as strong as the Straw Hats have gotten, I don't think they can deal with all of them at the same time right now, all on their own. Even with the giants there and with the Pacifistas, there's only so much that can be done. And as long as they delay them long enough for the rest of Vegapunk's message to get out, or if they find the place where it's being broadcasted from, which Pythagoras has been blown up, so he's not available. Shaka is not available unless they have like extra bodies waiting for them somewhere that just haven't been found yet. And Vegapunk's kind of out right now, or gone, so that's what's going on. So they'd have to find where it's coming from within the signal setup. I mean, Edison would probably be able to do that. Same thing with like Lilith and Atlas would probably be able to find where it's coming from. And then if they take the satellite setup with them, so it can still keep, Edison finds it, grabs it, takes it with them. And then it keeps broadcasting even after they leave the island, so that way it'll still broadcast Vegapunk's message to the world. And we don't know. It could be coming from inside of Punk Records itself, which could have like a setup where it's like it is impenetrable right now, or like Edison has to go and like activate that. and maybe that's like his last bit is that, or Atlas or Lilith might do something, or it's just like that's the last bit that we're going to get out of that. Stussy might do something, or she might know where it is. Probably not, but she might be able to be told where it is and find it and do something with it there. Same thing with, like, I mean, York is still trapped on the floor as far as we're aware. Kaku might pull something, but again, I don't know. He's still trapped in a bubble, as I love to keep bringing up. But it's just like there's only so much that could be done here, where it's just like, okay, well, they only have so many people here on the island that could work with this. If the World Economic Times balloon shows up at Egghead and they're able to like somehow attach Punk Records and like maybe the broadcasting device to, you know, the World Economic Times headquarters as it's being, you know, flown over the island or something like that, then that would be a good way of like getting it out of there. But that's also just like this huge slow moving floating target for the Gorosei to just literally be like, do any of us have like attack power? Okay, aim at that and pop it and make it fall, and then we're good. Or that might work, or something like that. And there's also the possibility that once like Vegapunk starts to explain what's going on, or explain his, you know, big news and, you know, hello world, and, you know, the true, set up for what's going on and everything like that, there's a possibility that maybe some of the Marines might, you know, change sides. They may make some other decisions. We'll see what happens, but there's that. And one last thing for this. Months ago, when we got the information that all of the different Gorosei are named after planets, specifically, you know, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, I started making the jokes, and other people started making the jokes that I loved, that they're comparing the Gorosei to the Sailor Scouts, because I'm a dork and I love Sailor Moon, and it's like comparing the Gorosei to the Sailor Scouts. And I know that when I was doing the videos where I was talking about the Gorosei, or the video where I talked about the Gorosei based on the information that we have now, or had at the time, that I had also made the comparison there to like the different Sailor Scouts. But then I had also made the comment in the video that I'm like, please, 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 let there be someone who will draw the Gorosei as the Sailor Scouts, as their respective Sailor Scouts that, you know, go with them. And thank God, and any other deity, and Nika too, who did this, because I love it. Someone did draw, and it's at least one person, I'm sure more than one person did this, but at least one person drew all 5 of the Gorosei as their respective Sailor Scouts. So, you know, Mercury is dressed as Sailor Mercury, and Venus Joro is dressed as Venus, and Mars is dressed as Mars, and Saint Jupiter is dressed as Jupiter, and Saturn is dressed as Sailor Saturn. And they even gave him like her sickle, her scythe that she has. So I loved it. When I was looking up stuff to try to, you know, find the spoilers for this chapter, that popped up in something, and it's like them dressed as the Sailor Scouts, and I loved it. And I do have that in a link down below in the description, because it's like, okay, I can't put this in the video because I don't have like the person's permission to use it in the video. But I am going to say something because it made me so happy when I saw it, and I love it, and I love that someone took the time to do that, and they look really, really good. So like, kudos to that artist. And I couldn't find like the main place where they're posted, but I at least attached like the Reddit thread, and like I read through some of the comments on the Reddit thread, and someone said, One Piece has just been this really long 20 some, you know, over 22, you know, over 25-year journey, so that way the Sailor Scouts can fight pirates. And I'm like, I love that idea, but I do not want Eam to be Sailor Moon. Whenever we get Eam's design of what they look like, then if someone wants to dress them like Sailor Moon, then that would be fine. Just to go with the rest of the Gorosei dressed as Sailor Scouts, that would be fine and hilarious. But that was just so funny. But I love that I saw those comments. So that made my day when I was looking for stuff. So I just wanted to point that out here. So kudos to that artist. So that's what I have here for this video. Next week there is a break for this, so there's no chapter next week. And I think I think I have stuff ready to do the next video about the next Black Clover video that I'm doing. So that's what I have for this. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.